use. There we go. So the chat will be a tool we'll use throughout today's session to collaborate. It's a great way to ask questions, comments, feedback. Please use this as an opportunity to engage. We've all sat on those webinars where we just like sit back and, eat a sandwich. And I would love for y'all to engage as much as possible, because there's some really amazing humans in the room today. Thank you again to Cecily for confirming that she could see my screen. There's going to be lots of screen sharing today. And so if there's ever a screen issue, please use the chat to let me know that. But again, if you haven't already, share in the chat where you're from, what kind of work you're doing, and anything that will help introduce yourself. But with that said, I want to get our session going. Our session today is on 5 steps to set up your 2023 marketing strategy. And this is one of my favorite sessions to teach. We teach it annually here at Fearless Foundry because I have a big belief that in the world of marketing, there's a lot of missteps that I see. And one of the biggest ones is people just doing tactics, just posting a thing, putting out an article, sending an email without strategy. But also strategy is this big mysterious thing that a lot of people think, oh, I've got to hire a consultant to help me shape a strategy, which, yeah, we definitely can help with that. But at the end of the day, strategy is about taking some big steps back to look at data, to look at the big picture, to assess your market. And I also think it's quite intuitive work. It's getting a read and feel for things. And so this is a really opportune time to do strategy work right at the end of the year, because it's a chance to look back before we look forward. And I think, I don't know, being in an Enneagram 3 means that I oftentimes want to race forward and be like, let's just focus on the plan for next year. But the most important thing we can actually do to start shaping strategy is start with a level of reflection. So really, my goals for this session today is to really share with you some honest insights about what is working and what is changing in the marketing landscape. And I bring that insight to you as the founder of a creative consulting firm that works with dozens of clients across industries. So we get to see in depth, what's working in social media, what's not working, what's changing in the webinar space, how our email campaigns doing. And we, get to gather up all those insights and share them with all of you. So that's, one of my first goals is to just really share this big picture view, not just from your business, but also what we're seeing in the wider landscape. And then second, the other big goal I really have today is to give you tools and resources. I love creating things that other people can then take and put into action. And so my team and I have compiled all of the ways in which we shape marketing strategy into templates that you can actually take away from this session so that you can build this work on your own. And so my goal is for you to walk away from today with the tools in hand, as well as the insights you needed to use those tools so that you can start building your marketing strategy for 2023. If you don't know me yet, I should take a quick moment to introduce myself, I guess. I am Madeline Reeves. I'm the founder and CEO of Fearless Foundry, which is a creative consulting firm focused on branding, marketing, and business development strategies. We work across industries, but have a deep, deep love in our heart for sustainable e-commerce-based brands, as well as coaches, consultants, folks who are really taking professional service work and bringing it to the world in a bigger way. I've been doing this work for the better part of a decade. I'm a creative in my heart, but I'm also a big tech nerd, and so is everyone on my team. So in addition to having this creative side to my brain, there's a lot of my strategy brain that is around, using tools to do data analysis, and also to build things like some of the templates we're going to show off later today. I'm also a coach, so I lead a mastermind program called Figure 8 for fearless female founders, and Carly is one of those members. I've done a lot of group work with women over the years and love to support early stage underrepresented entrepreneurs. I'm also a mom to 2 crazy boys who are about to be out of school, so say a little prayer for me on that one. And in general, I'm a content creator. I love creating content that can give back and support people as they scale businesses sustainably. So enough about me. If you haven't introduced yourself, do that in the chat. Tell me about you. But here's where we're headed today. Here's our map. So first and foremost, I mentioned this at the top of the conversation, but to me, the most important thing that we can do before we dive into next year is to reflect. And this is something that I'm trying to be better at, quite frankly. It's not innate in my nature to be very reflective, but I work with so many amazing women, one of whom is Avanti Kumar Singh. She is an Ayurvedic expert and an MD, and she has all this great content that really is a reminder about how we end the year through reflecting, resting, and digesting. And so before we can shape strategy, I want us to do some looking backwards and to be a little bit reflective, and not just think about the performance of your marketing, but also think about like what worked for your brand and your business energetically. Then we're going to get to look forward at marketing trends and how they might affect your strategy for next year. So we'll pair the looking back and looking forward together. Next, we're going to get into ideation, which is my favorite part of the process. This is really about brainstorming and letting your mind run a little bit wild of all the ways that you could possibly showcase your brand's offering in the year ahead. And the challenge I want to give you here is to really let your mind run wild. There's a moment in our process for editorializing and putting, things in the right proper place and deciding what you have bandwidth for. But when we're in ideation mode, just let the world be your oyster, and then we can analyze it a little bit later. And then last but not least, we'll end in our strategy session. So this is where I'm going to walk you through the process that we lead our clients through in order for you to then have everything you need to create an actionable marketing plan that you can either manage yourself or delegate accordingly if you have team members who might be involved in the process going forward. All right, so here we go. If you have questions as we move through, please put them in the chat. I saw Miral, you said I have a question before we start. So if you want to chime in with that, and then a reminder as well, I'll do my best. It's just me here today. My teams are on other calls, but I will do my best to manage the chat. And then we'll also have dedicated time for Q&A at the end. But as per usual, for anyone who's seen a webinar from me before, I tend to pack in as much as possible. And so I save questions at the end just so I can get through all the content. Miral, yeah, go ahead.
I'm driving. Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Go for it.
So I found you through CEO School, and I've been a fan ever since. I know that whatever you do, it's so aligned with what I would like to do, but I am a newbie. I am just starting off with the toy store and everything.
Yeah.
And also teaching Muslim families. I have done it for the past decade, but I wanted to create an online course. So my question to you is, if somebody wants to work with you, who is still in the startup, who's a founder, is figure 8 the way to go, or how can I work with you if I want to work with you?
First of all, thank you. I'm really honored by that comment. So thank you. And figure 8 is absolutely the way to do that. So at the end of this session, I'll make mention of a couple ways you can work with me as well as work with my team. And figure 8 is starting again in February, and we have a wait list, but there's room in that wait list. So I'll make sure that you get that link and everything after the session, Miral.
Okay, so it's not going to be, I'm not a figure 8 CEO, right? So it's just a name, right? It doesn't mean I have to be.
Carly can share in the chat, but it's a lot more about the energetics of being an entrepreneur than it is about the money you make. And with that said, we have really ambitious women who are making great revenue, but it's really about learning to be a CEO from an energetic perspective, as well as what it means to be a female founder. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. All right, let's do this thing. So first things first, I promised you, we're going to look back to look forward. So we're going to start in a state of reflection. So really what this moment is about is you taking a chance to step back and to think about, what worked well for you in the past year. And also if you had goals or had a strategy in place in the past, to do a little evaluation and determine, what was worthwhile, what resonated, what you feel great doing, and what you want to shift based off of what you learn in that reflection as we look forward into the new year. Now, I will tell you, I do this process every year. And when I started my business, I had webinars as a huge part of my strategy because it was a really popular new way to reach people online. I could grow my audience. And I did a webinar a month like this for a year. And it was hugely impactful. It grew my list dramatically. It allowed me to meet great people like Cecily. I think we met originally through a webinar. Like it was so fantastic. But then the pandemic hit. And everybody under the sun was on Zoom, and people could not stand to be on yet another Zoom call. And so as a result, I started to watch in 2020 as our webinar attendance numbers just took a nosedive off a cliff. And I was like, man, we've really got to figure out some new ways to be reaching our audience. And so we reflected and we shifted and we changed. And those are the kind of things I want you to be thinking about. Is there something you've been doing that's been working really well? How can you do more of it? Is there something that you've been doing that's not really landing based off of the amount of energy or effort you're putting in? Maybe that's something you want to shift or scale back from. And I think it's really important as we move through some of these questions that you also take into consideration not just performance of the activity, but also the energetics of it. So especially for those of us who are solo founders, who marketing is really like one of the many, many hats we wear, it's really critical, in my opinion, in order to build a sustainable and scalable marketing strategy, that you're involved in marketing activities that you love and feel really good energetically for you. So for example, for me, we've held a podcast for the past 3 years, and I hit a wall. I couldn't do it anymore. I was tired of it last summer. I was totally burnt out. And so I put it on hiatus, and I'm picking it back up in January because I finally feel ready to reapproach it. So that's an example of something energetically that I've assessed. And I want you to just consider that as we move through these core questions. Now, before we dive into the reflective moment, here's some information you might want to gather. And I'm going to just be really candid. You're not going to get to do all this reflection on the call today. For me, this process, I usually take a full week for it. And I love to take the week between Christmas and New Year's, because our company takes that week off. And I do this work during that time. It's because I'm also doing reflection in my personal life. So I'm reflecting about things like, what is my financials? What do I want those to look like next year? How do I feel as a person? What are my personal goals? So this is all work that I do during that time. But in order to do this strategy work well, these are the kinds of things that you might want to gather up as important information to review. So first and foremost, your website and landing page analytics. If you have a digital doorstep, you want to understand how that's working and performing for you. So gather up any analytics that are presented to you by that platform. So for example, Squarespace has really good built-in analytics, but you might also want to reach out and grab something out of Google as well, if you have Google Analytics set up for your website. Next thing you want to grab, if you're active on social media, all the analytics on a per platform basis. Now, some people do use platform aggregators like Hootsuite's a great example of this, something that you can post to all your platforms from. And those platforms do offer good levels of reporting, but I've always found it is important to go a little bit deeper and to grab the platform specific reporting, because there might be key data points that they're not aggregating or sharing through their API on a aggregate platform like Hootsuite. You also want to grab your ads data if you're doing any level of paid advertising for your brand, your blog performance data if you're sharing your podcast, a blog post, your podcast data, your email marketing data, basically reporting from anything and everything that you've promoted or posted on. Go grab that reporting. And if you don't have a tool that's going to give you that reporting, that's something to consider as part of your strategy in the new year. If there's an area where you feel like you're a little bit in the dark as to whether or not it's working and you don't have good data to show, that's an area where you might want to consider a new tool. So that's something you can reflect on next year. Now, again, I believe that great strategy starts with reflection and research. And so just really take some time to pull all these pieces together and then review them. And as you start to review them, here's some questions you might want to consider. And these questions and all of these slides, just as a heads up, are going to be emailed to you after the fact. So if you're a note taker, you don't have to sit there and write down these at 100 miles an hour. I'm going to just give them to you all. But I think these are really important ones to ask ourselves, because ultimately there are so many different factors these days that are integrated and connected that inform whether or not our marketing is performing well. And so something on the surface might look like it's not working, but asking these deeper questions can help you illuminate why, or if there's just a subtle switch or change that you might need to make in the year ahead. So core question number one, what marketing channels generated the most traffic to your website? So when I say marketing channels, I'm meaning a place or a platform where you're sharing your marketing. So you might look at your analytics and say, whoa, LinkedIn is driving a ton of traffic, or maybe it's organic search, or maybe it's Instagram, or maybe it's the opposite. You've been pouring all your time and energy into Instagram, but it's not actually driving any results for you. That's an important thing to look at to assess where are you pouring your energy, and is it ultimately leading to the result which you want, which is people showing up on your digital doorstep and taking a next action, whether that's purchasing a product, signing up for a consultation, et cetera, et cetera. The second question is, what types of posts perform best on each platform? So if you're active in social media, as you know, the reporting will share with you top performing posts. And I would challenge you to not just look at these overall for the year, but perhaps to break them down by month or by season, particularly if the type of content you shared varied dramatically during different points of the year. But this is really important to get an assessment of what is resonating with your audience so that you can figure out where can you just dial that up a little bit. So for me, this was really interesting, but about a year and a half, 2 years ago, my social media team, my staff recognized that I was having a lot better performance when I was sharing stuff that had nothing to do with our business. When I was sharing about who I am as a mom, who I am outside of my work, what are my struggles as an entrepreneur who's also married and has kids. Those sort of things were raw and were personal and were really behind the scenes, as opposed to this like outward facing thing of who I am as an entrepreneur. And so that really shifted the type of content I was sharing, particularly on Instagram. So something to consider there. Next is the core topics that are most engaging to your audience. So as you pull out and look at top performing posts or pieces that you've written, you might start to see these topics that are really landing for your audience. So for example, I know my audience loves it when I go off about the lack of childcare and support for female entrepreneurs, because a lot of my followers are women. They feel that viscerally. They've had those experiences, and it's something we can all relate on. I also get a lot of engagement when I share on the topic of sustainability, because that's part of who our core clients are, but it's also something that I'm deeply passionate about, and I know our audiences as well. So that's something for you to consider. What are those core threads, those core topics that really perform well? What subject lines got the best open rates? If you're involved in email campaigning, it's very much part art, part science. And so it can be good to look back and reflect and see which emails actually got opened more than others to inform maybe the way that you shape those in the future. What emails and newsletters got the same engagement? So same thing, was it about the topic? Was it about the style of posting? Was it about the length of the content? Those are all things you might want to analyze at a deeper level when you start to understand, oh, this one performed best, but why? Next, what types of content was your audience most likely to share? So it's one thing for somebody to like and engage with something, but what are they going to pass on? Because that allows you to make a bigger impact. So look back at what was shared. What types of content did you actually feel inspired to create? This is the most important question for me if you're a solo founder doing the content creation, is I actually care very little about what your audience liked and very much about what you genuinely want to show up and continue to share. Because especially with social media, it is such a grind these days that you're going to burn out if you're not sharing content that actually inspires you. Next, what content led to sales or leads? At the end of the day, you're here because you're growing a business. And so if your core intention is to scale that business over time, or even just to sustain it, you're going to need to continue to generate sales and leads. And so looking back and seeing if you can trace a thread between the content you shared and what generates leads. For example, for me, this was a webinar. It allows us to grow our list. There were 35 people who registered for it. And I can compare that to other webinars that I've done in the past or that I plan to do in the future to determine which topics really perform well and drew the most people in. Next, what social media platforms had the best performance? So again, just looking across the board, and performance can be measured in a multitude of ways. Depending on what your end goal is, that might be how many followers you grew. But actually, I think it's more important to look at engagement. How many people commented, liked, shared, had something to say about what you were sharing. Because at the end of the day, if you have 100,000 followers, but you have 1 or 2 people engaging with you, that's obviously not going to lead to tangible results for your business. So just really hone in on where are people being attracted to your content and engaging with it as you assess what performs best. Are there any channels worth cutting back on? You will see throughout this session, I am a big believer that less is more when it comes to marketing well, and that you should maybe hone in and focus on core channels that make sense to your ideal audience, make sense for you as a business owner. And so if you feel a little bit like you're doing too much, or like you're a little bit burnt out by how much you're sharing and posting, and you don't have somebody else that you can delegate that work to, there might be a moment when you start to look at all this data where you're like, oh, we don't need to send that many emails, or we can, stop posting on Facebook because nobody likes being there anyways, or that's my personal opinion. But you get where I'm going with that. Where can you do less so that you can actually do more from a results perspective? And then last but not least, are there any consistent dates and times, moments where content seems to perform better than ever, so that you can use that to inform when you're sharing in the future? So for me, for example, I know my audience really well, and I know that my content times to post are actually after 6 p.m. or before 8 a.m. particularly on Instagram. And reason being is because my followers on there are typically really busy entrepreneurs. And so the times that they're showing up on that platform is to actually engage with content, and not just to post their own content, is after or before the workday. Whereas on a platform like LinkedIn, I share a lot more during the daytime because that's when that audience is online. So something to think about there. All right. So again, all these questions are going to be handed to you, but as you start to look at the data, these are the sort of things that I want you to ask yourself. And then if there's another question you want to ask, or something that you think could be pertinent, share it in the chat. Like, this is an opportunity for you to really evaluate and assess, and to go forward and take that data and turn it into a powerful plan. All right. So next step of the puzzle is to ask yourself about where evolution needs to happen. So I do a lot of brand strategy work. It's one of my biggest loves. And ultimately, one of the main mistakes I see brands make is, after they assess all of that information, they don't actually make any adjustments to how they're showing up as a brand. And this is really important because I think that, again, kind of similar to strategy, brand is like this mythical thing that people think they can't grab a hold of. And in reality, the brand is really the story that you as a business are choosing to share with the world. But great brands evolve over time. And in fact, the brands that have become the most irrelevant, in my opinion, are the ones that have not done these moments of reflection and evolved in order to keep up with changes in their industry and changes in their company. And I think we can all think of, outdated, brands that are from the 1950s that just have not kept up with this moment in time, and how that they're losing traction with their customers. And the last thing that you would want to be is that kind of brand. And so for me, one of the first things I want you to do is to look back all the way to the very beginning of last year. And, if you have any documentation, if you're like me, maybe there's some journal writing you did, maybe there's a strategy or plan you put in place, go look back at those materials, and then take some time to reflect and write about what has shifted since then. What has changed in the past year? And when I think about those changes, I think about things like, who are we now as a brand, and how has that evolved in the past year? For me, for example, in this past year, our word for 2022 was sustainability. And so this year we were focused on becoming a B Corp. We were focused on attracting more clients that were working at an intersection with sustainability. And I can see how all of those shifts of turning up the dial on the side of our brand that was all about sustainability has really led to a lot of great results, because that's something we leaned into. And we've become more sustainable as a business. We've changed out all the ways we mail things, and we've, gotten rid of even more paper and done all these different things. But it also means that I can stand really authentically in that narrative of sustainability and attract more clients like that, which is really exciting to me. The next question is to ask is, what changes or shifts have we seen in our industry, and how are we reacting or responding to them to meet the needs of our market? So if you work in an industry, particularly if it's an industry that maybe is a little behind the times, I'm not looking at my accounting peeps, but I am looking at my accounting peeps, that there's this really cool moment that you have to differentiate yourself simply by being different than the mainstream narrative, right? Like simply by being a little bit more futuristic, more technology focused, more creative. Those are all things that suddenly can lead to you having a huge differentiator in this industry or space. And so looking out at the lens of the wider industry that you're held in and how you're compared to other people, and then, thinking about, again, how do you need to evolve? Next question is, who is your ideal audience now? Emphasis on now, because ultimately, your ideal audience might have been different at the start of last year. My ideal audience 3 years ago could not be more different than who my ideal audience is now. And so asking yourself, who is your ideal audience now in this moment as you wrap up the year? And how has it evolved over time? And for example, you might again have historic materials like client avatars or personas you developed back then that might need some updating and evolution as you start to reflect on these things. And then the last question is, how does our market need to shift? How does our marketing need to shift in response to these evolutions in our business and the wider landscape of our industry and the world at large? And so again, now that you've looked at all these little pieces that have shifted over the past year, how do you need to maybe be marketing differently? What are the ways that you want to show up that feel authentic, that feel in alignment based off of the ways your brand has evolved and changed over time? So those are some really, really big questions. Again, you're not going to get a chance to answer all of these today. Take these away, take the time to do the reflection work you really need to do. And then I want to just put some new ideas in your pocket to take away. So we do a lot of assessment, and it is trends time of the year. This is when everybody puts out their predictions for 2023. And I always like to share mine based off of our level of analysis. We do this research. We look at all of our clients' performance, and these are the things that we share each year, and they change. And so last year the first one on the list was more video marketing. And I definitely think that was a trend we saw come to fruition. TikTok continued to explode. Reels became the primary algorithmic indicator inside of Instagram. They admitted on many, many pieces of external content that they're prioritizing video-based content. Other players came into the social media space. Be Real, LinkedIn offered more live streaming capabilities. These are all market indicators that video is becoming more and more of a thing. And it's something that we should all be considering how we want to integrate into our marketing. But I want to emphasize here that a lot of us think this is like just a social media thing, but I have seen video integration come across all types of situations. So I've seen a lot more video integration into the homepage of people's websites, so that rather than having a wall of copy, you've got 30-minute explainers that tell people exactly why you're here and what is the work you do. Videos have grown tremendously in organic social ads. So it used to be you could just have a static image. Nope. If you're doing any sort of social advertising or digital advertising, video is the primary preferred mechanism. Videos embedded into blog posts have become a big thing, so that people can, again, get a different way to get people's attentions, embedded into emails. Again, all this live streaming, like there's videos here to stay, and there's lots of ways to do it. It doesn't just have to be showing up and talking to a camera. And so if it's not something you're considering or doing yet, I definitely think it's something to look at as you head into next year. We're also seeing more embedded GIFs and embedded videos that are explainer based. And I'm seeing this in everything from really good onboarding processes all the way down to things like product disclaimers or description pages. And so, there's a way, when people have the attention span of a goldfish, to create something that's animated or visual that's going to get their attention a little bit better and help give them insight. And then I also think that there's an accessibility factor here that's pretty interesting. So if somebody is not is dyslexic or doesn't like reading or is not able to just absorb information and understanding from written text, using things like video and visual formats can give us a more accessible way to market to people. And last but not least, I'll say here is that all the algorithms and new apps that are coming out in the social media space are being dialed up to be very video centric. So things to consider. Next is niching or streamlining your social channels. So I'm very proud of myself because I was on the cutting edge of this trend, and I was one of the few people back, in 2017 saying, stop trying to show up on every single social media platform. It's a waste of your time and energy. Your audience isn't everywhere. Really focus yourself on the channels that make sense for your brand, for your business. And ultimately, being on every social media channel isn't the goal. The goal is to meet your audience on their preferred platform and curate tailored content that resonates with them. Your goal is engagement, it's not followers. And your goal is to really set yourself up in a way to create content that is not generic. And if I will just tell you, as somebody who has a team who runs social media for other people, if you're trying to be on, 3, 4, 5, 6 platforms, unless you have a team to do that, you're going to just be posting the same crap on every single platform, maybe with like a slightly different word count. And your audience is going to start tuning you out because it's really annoying to see people do that where they're just, regurgitating things across platforms. Ultimately, the approach that I proselytize is called a primary platform approach. We're based off of assessing your market, your offering, your brand, and your ideal audience. You determine one platform that is where you want to focus the bulk of your energy towards, and then you expand out into other platforms over time, but you center your strategy on that one primary platform. So big fan of this. Definitely, as you start to assess, figure out what you're going to get rid of next year. Next one is connecting through audio-centric and live content. Hello, webinars are still a thing. But also a big change we're seeing is live podcasting and live streaming shows. They're making a big comeback. So a lot of folks were a little bit...
I'll have to come and see.
If you're not muted, I'm going to mute you. Please mute yourself. Thank you. Awesome. So what I was going to say is live shows are, this is great timing actually. Live shows are great because people like engaging in an unpolished way with their audience. People like the moments like the one that I just had because it feels human, it feels accessible, it feels like something that you could pull off on your own, right? And so I think that one of the things that I really like about this is that we can stop thinking that in order for us to show up on video, we have to be perfect and polished, but instead we can create these formats that are more about interacting with the audience, that are more about having some things happen off the cuff or happen in an unpolished way. Audio-centric content is also really great for upcycling into other forms of content. So I'm going to have my team take this webinar, slice it up into videos. They're going to write a blog post about it. They're going to turn it into Instagram stories and a reel. And what's great about that is if, you have this one moment like a live webinar, you can suddenly turn it into a bunch of different content that can continue to get that message out in a variety of ways. Also, if people are burned out by screen time, audio-centric content can be a really great way for people to still show up and tune in. So for example, on this session, people can turn their cameras off, they can listen. Podcasts are obviously very popular for this reason. We can listen to them while we're doing the dishes, etc. And we're continuing to see this trend that started when Clubhouse came to the market. So a lot of people were very interested in this give and take. How do I become a part of the conversation? How can I not just be a listener, but a contributor? Clubhouse has fallen off significantly as a platform, but we're now seeing those same sort of features, like having live spaces where people can have engaging conversations show up on platforms like Twitter, LinkedIn, Riverside FM, etc. Last but not least on this slide is developing a community-centric approach to marketing. This should come as no surprise after the pandemic. We're all craving deeper levels of connection and community. And this is a really powerful way to build a loyal audience around your product or services. We're big fans of member communities. We build them a lot for our clients. Slack channels are still a popular thing, or any sort of insider group. Circle's one that's growing in popularity. Mighty Networks is another platform, Patreon, things like that, where you can create a group that allows for you to, again, have this two-way relationship. Gather feedback is key for you as a brand. Like, I love communities because you can get feedback, you can get I'm thinking about Ellen, who's on this call. She used community to get product feedback, and that was really powerful for her in her next round of product development. Testimonials, ambassadors, and again, this powerful way of creating connection among your audience, which is really great. And we're also seeing a huge uptick in this space of new platforms. So people, used to for many, many years just create communities on Facebook, and a lot of people have migrated away from the platform. So I mentioned some of those: Mighty Network, Circle, Patreon, Kajabi just rolled out community functionality. There's a lot of new tools and systems in this space that allow you to brand them and build your own community. Pro and con here, in my opinion, is that you're asking people to add yet another app, yet another inbox. And so there's a lot of thought process to be had around strategizing the right way to get a community up and running that is actually engaging. Or do you just want to have a community side of your brand that's in person as opposed to digital? Okay. Next set of trends is these 4 most important ones here. Going off of this idea of community is an increasing level of in-person events and activations. And when we say activations, these are moments where you can have an introduction to your brand or a specific product that really then create community. So it's an extension of this community idea, but people really want to connect out in the real world. And we've just seen a huge uptick of experiential events, pop-ups, and live events. It's just never been more popular or more powerful. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm just thinking about like the few networking events I went to this fall. And, it was just such a different feeling, as compared to ones prior to the pandemic. I'm still feeling a little like, awkward and like I don't know what to do with my hands, but also just this like real reverence and gratitude for being able to get together in person with people again. The second, and I love this trend, obsessed, is diverse brand representation and accessible marketing. This is super core to the things that I believe in. And ultimately, we've seen through a lot of data and market analysis that consumers care about seeing themselves and others represented in marketing more than ever before. And this is a really big shift. So previously, data often indicated that people cared about seeing themselves represented. And so if we're trying to serve a diverse audience, we again need representative marketing. But if somebody's audience was not very diverse, that meant they could have marketing that was just like all of that ideal client archetype. But what I love now is today's consumers, especially on the younger end of the demographic, are very interested and aware of how important diversity, equity, and inclusion is. And so they are vetting brands based off of the visuals that they are representing with. And so if they go to a landing page and they do not see representation, they're judging you. And I love this because it pushes the needle and it pushes the conversation, and it means that representation just has to happen. It's table stakes for particularly for younger consumers. And so what we see as a result is that brands more than ever before have had to look for suddenly diverse stock images. And if you're somebody who's on the creator side of this equation, you know that it's still a pretty abysmal place out there. And oftentimes we just have to do our own brand shoots to get the imagery we need. But there are also tools that have taken off in the marketplace. One of my favorite is called Tonal. I'll put it in the chat. It's a really great database of diverse imagery where you go and you type in the word marriage and you're going to get every type of marriage. You type in the word, money, and you're going to see all types of humans working with money. And especially for me, as somebody who's worked in this space a long time, it's a big challenge to want to be as representative as possible and also having the visuals to do so. And for a long time, designers were getting by just creating graphic imagery or graphics that were representative because we didn't have the imagery to do so. So this is a trend to really consider in how you're representing yourself online. And then secondarily, this is tied in here, is that brands also need to be thinking more about accessibility in their marketing. And the cool thing about this is that the technology is making some really great strides to start to make this possible, particularly because we have so much great AI that's coming to the table through an accessibility lens. I always think there needs to be more, and I think that there needs to be more developers of color and of disabilities in the AI space. That's a whole webinar in itself. But the good news is things like closed captioning and transcription tools and video automation and things like that are getting a lot better, which will make it easier for small brands to be able to create accessible marketing. If you're fascinated about the topic of accessible marketing, we at Fearless wrote a piece about it a while back that's linked in our resources at the end, and we'll give you some ideas as to how you can get started with this accessible marketing for your brand as well. Third trend here on the slide is affiliate marketing overtaking influencer marketing. I love this one also because I think we're all sick of being influenced. If you've been on Instagram and some girl has tried to sell you like a gummy bear that's gonna make you skinny, or has tried to tell you about this potion that's gonna make your life better, we're just tired of that. And also consumers are more aware. So folks are really worn out on being targeted by big influencers. And they understand that those folks are getting pushed or paid to push those products. And so the level of credibility they associate with those individuals has decreased significantly. And as a result, we are seeing this rise in affiliate marketing. And affiliate marketing is, I am affiliated with this brand. I have a partnership, a connection, a relationship with them. And at some level, I have used this product in real life, and I probably have a significantly smaller following, but I'm sharing about this because I would actually just share about this regardless of whether or not you paid me to, but it's really cool that you're paying me to, so I'm going to share about it even more. So for example, for me, I talk on my podcast a lot about tools that I love. And one right now is called Honeybook. And I love Honeybook because it's how we've done all of our proposal processes and all of our CRM and all of our customer intake. It's super cheap and accessible. And I would talk about it regardless, but I also have an affiliate link for it because I'm giving them free promotion. And so it's nice to get that kickback. I also think a big change here is that people are being a lot more candid about when things are ads, when they're getting paid or are affiliated with somebody, because also there are more and more trade regulations that are cracking down on things, and that will continue to grow. If you followed what happened with the collapse of FTX and the amount of influencer marketing that they put behind promoting that platform, the FTC is going to be a lot stricter in the future around influencer type activities, both from a taxation standpoint and from the standpoint of how appropriate that is from a marketing perspective. The other thing here in this landscape is this shift towards more what we call user-generated content, UGC. And UGC is a really great way for you as a brand to get your stuff out there without you having to create the content. And so at Fearless, we've been building more and more affiliate partnerships where we identify affiliates for our clients, and then we put together an affiliate contract that says, hey, we'd love for you to promote the product, and these are the types of content we'd love for you to create. And it's a really great mutual relationship because those people tend to like creating content, which the brand needs. And it's a great way for everybody to get what they need out of the relationship. And it also means that everybody involved is being a little bit more honest and transparent about how that transaction is going down. And customers actually really appreciate seeing someone like them who is actually using the product and approves of the product. So this is, things you've probably seen more and more unboxing, or somebody, trying on a piece of an apparel, or, using a product in their skincare routine and talking about why they really like it. But again, being a true product user and then creating content around it. Last but not least, but I think, again, it goes hand in hand, is this notion of scaling your audience through partnerships. So there used to be this thought process in the earlier ages of social media where we just all hoped whatever it was would go viral and we'd be a gazillionaire, et cetera, et cetera. Those days are kind of over. And so now a big way for smaller brands to grow is to reach out to other people and build partnerships and product collaborations, which is a core way to get a lot more reach, potentially for no spend for you as a brand. And that can be a huge benefit for brands involved. So for example, for our clients that are in kind of a motherhood or maternity adjacent space, we've seen them have a lot of success getting together 3 or 4 other brands that sell similar products for kids or for mothers, doing a giveaway or a promotion or a cross post or an Instagram live, all these sort of activities that cost them nothing except for their energy, but allow them to cross-pollinate their audience and reach more people through that partnership. So That's a ton of information on trends and changes. If there's something else that you see in the space that you think is fascinating, again, share in the chat. I love group learning. But those are the things that we see as the biggest kind of shifts and things that you should be thinking about when it comes to building a marketing strategy of your own. All right, this is where we get into the funnest part. Ideation. It is really about letting your imagination run wild. And in order to do so, I want you to start by tapping into your target market. So I want you to just like take a moment, put your feet on the ground if they're not, really get into the mindset of your person, the person that you want to show up on your digital doorstep, or maybe you have an in-person office. I have one, but I don't let people visit me here. I just hide. But who is the person that you want to find the work that you're doing and to ultimately engage with you? And really what I believe is that in order to truly build a scalable marketing strategy, you first have to understand this person, or, the replicate of that, which is your ideal audience, because otherwise the content you're going to be creating is just going to be content for content's sake. And it's going to be just wasting your time shouting out into the ether. So I really want you to take time to evaluate it. What worked for you last year might not work for you anymore. Or maybe you're expanding to reach a new market. Maybe, you got to know the persona that you thought was your person, and then you were like, just kidding. I don't want to work with them anymore. They're too cheap. They're, they don't understand, the product, or whatever that reason is. There's tons of reasons why we might want to shift or expand. And so for you, it's key to assess and clarify whether the target market you're going to have in 2023 is exactly the one you have now, or if it's going to shift and change, so that you can then ideate and create content that resonates with them in a meaningful manner. And then the third piece here is that personas, in my opinion, are a really key piece of this process, particularly if you're working in an environment where more than one person is involved in your marketing. Now, if you are just the only person crafting your content, you can get away for a while without having any sort of, some people call these client avatars. I hate that notion. I build personas because they're around real people. And every time I've ever created a persona, it's around a real person, because we market to real humans, not fictitious characters on the internet. And so if you don't have a persona, if you haven't done the process of creating an ideal client archetype, anything like that, that's okay. But the second you start getting to a point where other people are going to write your content, or other people are going to be involved in the process in some way, really take the time it takes to build personas. And if you have them already, take time to revise them, or to ideate about how maybe this person has grown, evolved, and changed over the past year, just in the same way that you have. And so ultimately, this is a moment of revising and revision. And if you need guidance on any of the how, if you're like, what the heck is a persona? I have no idea what you're talking about. I've got a ton of materials in the resource section so that you can just go away and do that, because we've got how-tos on those sort of things. All right. So first, getting into the mindset of the target market. And sometimes people struggle here because they might have multiples. So for example, I have an ideal persona at Fearless that is this sustainable founder who does work in direct to consumer. They are, in an e-commerce based business. That archetype and the things that they think about is very different than our other persona, which is a professional service business that is looking to scale through community online. So keeping that in mind, if you're going to do any ideation or take any notes as we move along today, maybe just pick one. And when you get to the moment of doing this strategy work on your own, take some time to ideate for each persona that you have. It just helps my brain. I'm a little ADHD. It helps my brain to kind of separate them out and do unique lists for each of them, so that I don't feel like it's all mixed together or muddled, or I'm uncertain of which persona we're trying to speak through the content we're coming up with. All right. So I already said this. And those, just so you know, are examples that actually came out of what Fearless personas are and work we've done for our clients. So we're giving you real examples. So the next piece is coming up with your content mix. So content mix is all the different types of content you're going to put out in the world. And there's so many different kinds of content, and creation is so fun, and I'm super obsessed with it. But the question you want to ask before you start to brainstorm is, what types of content gets the most traction and engagement? So is it carousel posts? Do people really like short form videos? Is it GIFs, memes, super long blog posts about your personal life, in-person events? Again, before you're just like, oh, I wish we could do all this, what's going to work based off of your intuitive understanding, your target market, again, this assessment of last year. And if you already have ideas that are burning in your heart, please share them in the chat. If you're like, oh, next year I want to do more blogs. Next year I want to start a podcast. I saw a lot of that this year. Like a lot of people started podcasts. But really, the question here is like, what really is going to get your audience talking, connecting, commenting, sharing, replying with, and being engaged with your brand? And if you're not sure, I would say, one, ask your audience if you've got one. Reach out to them and be like, what do you want more of? They might say to you, oh my God, I don't have time for another podcast, but I would love just like 5-minute explainer videos on this. Great. They've done the work for you. And also ask yourself, again, if you're the content creator, what do you love? What do you want to do more of? Love that Maral shared YouTube channel. I'm not a YouTuber. I could never, but I just have so much respect for people who build YouTube channels because they are such a labor of love, and the people who do them really love them. And then for me, there's this second notion. So I say, where are the areas of aligned inspiration? And I kind of started talking about this, but it's like, if you're going to be the content creator, you're going to burn out if you aren't creating content that is enjoyable and inspiring to you. And so you should feel super passionate about the content that's in your content mix if you're the creator. Now, there's parts of my content mix that I'm not super jazzed about, but I do think are essential because I have a marketing-based brand, but I'm not the one who leads them. So for example, we do it a lot on social media, but I have a love-hate relationship with it. And so my social media strategist, who is obsessed with social media, her name's Alina, she's amazing. She leads that channel and she's really into that. And so for me, I lean into the areas that I love. I love the writing. I love the live teaching and training. I love our podcast. Those are the areas I lean into. But, your content mix should be about what resonates with your audience, but it should also be about what's aligned with you and your team and what do you actually want to create. Because you can also be crafty here. If you're a team of one and you love podcasting, but you also know that videos and blogs are going to perform really well for your audience, you could do what we're doing and record via Zoom to be able to clip the recordings into micro videos and then transcribe them into audio content for your website. So for example, a lot of what I'm going to be doing on my podcast next year is live sessions that we strip the audio from and turn that into a podcast episode just to work smarter, not harder. All right, so content mix. Hopefully you've thought about, oh, maybe it's more emails, maybe it's more blogs, maybe it's more this and that. Think about it. And then the outlets. So the content mix is what are you producing? The outlets are where you produce it on, so traditional outlets back in the 50s would be your local newspaper. Maybe that's still one of your outlets. Kudos to you. That's interesting. But a lot of our outlets these days are digital. And so really this is about thinking about what platforms are best for the content you want to create. So when you think about the types of content that make most sense for you and your brand, start there. Again, okay, I want more emails. I want more newsletters. I want more podcasting. Cool. Now figure out what tools or platforms you should be using to disseminate that information in a way that grows your audience. Bonus point and spoiler is I'm going to give you away some ideas. So if newsletters and emails are super high on your list, really focus on building a list in an email platform that you own and love. I am not a fan of MailChimp. That's a webinar in itself. We're loving HubSpot these days, particularly because they offer a lower cost subscription now to small business owners. They didn't even have that 6 months ago. Active Campaign, Emma, I hate Constant Contact. I can't recommend it. Squarespace has a pretty decent one that's integrated into their entry-level sites if you're, doing smaller level stuff. Substack is super popular now for people for this. Medium. Also, people love doing LinkedIn newsletters. We've seen a ton of growth on LinkedIn newsletters. Ooh, other suggestions in the chat. Demio, MailerLite. There's 1,000,001 tools in this space. I don't use either of those. For our clients, we do a ton of work on Klaviyo. And we do a ton of work on HubSpot, a little bit here and there on ActiveCampaign. And great feedback from Robin, who said HubSpot was too overwhelming for me. I think that's so true. HubSpot and Salesforce and tools like that are like 800-pound gorillas that unless you need those levels of automation, you don't necessarily need a platform like that. And so you might be better fit on like a ActiveCampaign, Constant Contact, MailerLite, something like that, that is just really email centric. So choose your weapons accordingly, but these are just some ideas to offer. Blogs and articles, if that's where you want to double down, focus on your site first. Again, that's the platform you own. So making sure that the blog section of your site is really, really enticing and beautiful for you to log in and use and share with your audience, that it feels like a beautiful representation of you. And then other things to think about are publishing outlets like Substack and Medium, where you might be able to reach a bigger audience. If you really like writing articles, it might be worth considering if you want to include an approach to PR, where you're getting those articles published on a bigger outlet. LinkedIn articles are also really popular. We've seen a lot of growth there this past year. Social channels, I've said it before, walk through and pick one platform that you really feel aligned with. And again, really focus on what is the content type that performs here. So, video versus written versus audio versus imagery, those are things to really think about when you're selecting the social channel that you want to spend time on. Again, I really like writing. And so for a long time, I thought Instagram was the best platform for me, because old school Instagram was really about like, you share that one pretty picture and then like this beautiful story behind it. And a lot of us like former bloggers loved that about old school Instagram, but that's not what you're getting in the platform anymore. It's all video. So pick accordingly. Last two is advertising, so social media, but definitely focus more on Google, because there are more niched industry opportunities there, and you can also get more for your money these days. Webinars and events, I do want to do some live streaming. There's some great platforms that I've started to use, including Zoom, but I also like live streaming natively on those platforms. And then podcasting. If you want to do more podcasting next year, there's lots of great new tools that have come to the market. We used to use a different setup, and now we're starting to use Riverside FM as our primary podcasting platform, because it allows us to live stream across platforms, and it helps on the production side for our producers. So if you ever want to nerd out around like particular tools and platforms, reach out to me. But what I also want to say here is, beyond just the platforms you pick, you should also think about, again, what is the channels that makes most sense for your audience. So when I say channels, I mean every possible manner for you to market, from old-fashioned blogs and emails all the way to things like digital ads, activations, virtual events, social media marketing, all those things. But the key is for you to choose a channel where you know that there's going to be ROI, return on investment, for the effort and spend, and also based off of what is doable for you or you and your team. So if you don't have video editing skills or the resources to pay somebody to produce that content for you, YouTube probably shouldn't be one of your first channels out the gate, unless you're so super cool with having something that's very like production light. If you are really into podcasting, but you don't have any time to have those conversations, maybe that's something you want to aspire for a little later on when you have more time in your calendar. Ultimately, remember, you should focus on meeting your audience where they want to be met. And so, I'm doing new things this year, like live streaming my podcast to LinkedIn, because my audience spends a lot of time there during the day. And I know that that will be a way that I can grow the reach of that activity. But when in doubt, start with 3 channels and test new ones as you have capacity, and add them in if they end up being aligned with your energetic investment. So, start with 3 or less. And then if you want to test out a new channel, do just a little beta test. Don't go all in. But if it really feels like it's good and you're getting engagement from it, then you can add that channel over time as you have capacity. And when in doubt, like where you should be sharing and posting and things like that, again, ask your audience. You've got people who are connected to your brand that would be happy to share this kind of feedback with you. All right, I'm feeling very conscious of the time limit and knowing the fact that I like to share a lot, and I probably should have made this a 90-minute webinar. So I'm going to just give myself grace to go over. And if you cannot stay, know that I will send you the recording. But a couple key things I want to mention here is amplifying your brand through collaboration. So 3 things to be thinking about again as you ideate is brainstorming where you could be creating an offering that allows for you to reach a new audience. And what I mean by that is just asking yourself, like, who could I be co-creating something with? Who could I do a giveaway with? Who in my network has an audience that makes sense for me to cross-pollinate with? How could we even co-create a product together? We've seen a lot of these this year, like these cool like collab products, and I'm kind of like weirdly into it. And I'm really into it when it's like 2 brands that you're like, what? Like Nike and Jello? Like, what did they make together? Like, it's so odd and out there. But I think that that's really powerful, and a way to capture new markets is to build collaborative offerings. And so, you know, another one that I love together was it's a pretty infamous one, but my kids are addicted to it, is a Lego and Disney collaboration. I have Lego builders in my household who also love Raya and the Last Dragon. And so because of that, that is now on our holiday shopping list kind of thing. So thinking about, you know, how can you extend your brand's reach and grow your audience through some sort of collaborative initiative, and really brainstorm around that, because, you know, the worst thing that can happen to you is you ask somebody and they say no, right? And what you'll be surprised, I think, is a lot of people are trying to extend their brand reach as well and are really open to collaborating on content. Next is cross-promotion of content. So slightly different, slightly less effort. Cross-promotion is just entering into a pact with another business and saying, I will promote your shit. And sometimes this is super formal. You know, you might have a formal agreement in place, you know, that you know, says like, if I send you a referral, you know, you'll make this much, et cetera, et cetera. But I will tell you, some of the most powerful social media strategies I've seen this year are just groups of women getting together and saying, you and me, we're going to all share each other's stuff and help our audience grow this year. And so I'm like, who is the group of folks that you could get together who you know have an aligned, integrated audience with yours, and brainstorm and build just a collaboration and a partnership where you can extend your reach through, you know, highlighting each other's stuff through your social stories and things like that. And then third is, you know, I mentioned this notion of affiliate partnerships being a really good way for you to get user-generated content and to incentivize others to promote your brand. And so if you want to go beyond just those informal agreements and step it up a notch and have other people create the content for you, consider either setting aside budget to invest in those paid partnerships or micro influencers or creator content. And, you know, you're going to just want to ensure that you have a formal contract in place for those sort of things. And if you need help with that, or you have no idea what I'm talking about, this is something that Fearless can definitely help you do. And then the last piece on the ideation side is to really ensure that you have, oh, mute yourself if you haven't, thank you, is to ensure that you have a content cadence that is actually going to really work for you. And so again, I'm a big believer of building what I consider sustainable marketing strategies. And the main mistake that I see people make is they try and do everything all at once, all the time. And not only is that not going to be sustainable for you, but even if you have a team that can pull it off, it really leads to audience overwhelm. So what I say is, you know, more isn't better when it comes to marketing. Your goal should be really to create meaningful content more than just a volume of content. And it should be content that resonates with your ideal audience. And that process takes analysis, it takes time, it takes reflection. And so you should really focus on building a rhythm that works for you and your audience. You know, I always say, like, start with a once a month or once a quarter frequency on things like blogs or newsletters or articles, emails, just so you don't overwhelm your audience. And again, it's something you can do. And then, you know, start small, aim for like a couple times a week on social media, and scale those things over time. I also say determine a cadence that you have the capacity to execute consistently. The marketing is about momentum. It's about having a rhythm. It's about really, snowballing over time. And if you're DIYing your marketing, you're going to burn out if you're overly ambitious on what that cadence is. So when I started my newsletters, it was monthly. Now we deliver a weekly newsletter, but I will say full stop that I don't always write it because I have, I'm on vacation. I have stuff that comes up. I have a writer on our team that co-creates that content with me when I don't have the capacity to. So if you're not somebody who has a writer on the back burner to create that content for you, consider what works well for you. Third, don't overwhelm your audience. This is the shit that I'm so sick of. We had a potential partner this year just email campaign us to the point where they ended up in our spam filter. We didn't even mark them as spam. Google was just like, anybody who's emailing this many times a day is offensive. And ultimately, like, posting and promoting too often is not just going to tire you out, but it's going to burn out your audience and your list. It's going to get you on flags with folks like Google. So, when in doubt, my mantra is market like you'd want to be marketed to. If you wouldn't receive that well, if that much content would turn you off, don't do that shit to your audience. All right. So those are all the things that I want you to consider as you ideate. But I now want to show you the tools, the real system that is what is going to make you be able to take those ideas and put them into action. And so first is setting of a meaningful objectives. And I will show you, I'm going to talk to you about the what, and then I'm going to show you the how. So step one is to create meaningful objectives. This is to define your goals for the next 90 days from a marketing perspective, and then break them down monthly if needed. I do have a background in data analytics. I'm a big fan of data. And ultimately, this is really to ensure that every action that you're going to take from a marketing perspective ladders up to achieving those desired outcomes. So for example, you might have a revenue objective, you might have a new client objective, you might have an engagement objective, whatever that is. Ultimately, this is a tool that gives you the ability to say, when I'm in doubt about whether a marketing activity is worthwhile, I can say, does this action ladder up to that larger marketing goal? Does it help me get more engagement? Does it help me get more sales? Does it help me, whatever the goal is? And if the answer is yes, then that marketing activity is a good use of your time. If the answer is no, move on to the next thing, because there's always more ways to market. So step one is to create meaningful objectives. Step two is to define the direction and key dates. And so really, this is about assessing and documenting the core areas that are either at the month level or in the week level. And when I show you the template, this will make a lot of sense. But really, this is about defining for yourself, are there core cultural moments that are happening for your brand? For example, I'm a queer human. There is certain content I share during June because that is Pride Month. Is there a target customer mindset happening? If you're a fitness adjacent brand and it's January, the target customer mindset is all about New Year, New Year. So what is your take on that? How would you say something different than what the rest of the market is saying? Key events or holidays, Christmas is coming up, Hanukkah is coming up, the solstice is coming up, New Year's is coming up. Those are all holidays that we all acknowledge and recognize. And those may have specific meanings to your brand. There might be key messages that you want to share on those days. Brand events. So this could be a launch date, a webinar, maybe you only take clients at the start of the quarter. Anything like that is something you want to incorporate into defining your overarching dates. And also, just your general kind of high-level action plan that you want to build is based off of taking these pieces into consideration. So you're going to make a list of all of these pieces and plan out how you want to manage them channel by channel. And if you cannot see these things further than 30 days out, like my goal is to get you to a point where you can strategize at least on a quarterly level. But if you're in the thick of it, if it's crazy and year end, like I'm living through right now, I'll be honest, my current marketing plan is 30 days out right now because we've been so busy at year end. I'm going to take time to do this process, like I mentioned, at end of year, get it set up through the next 90 days. But if you're only in those next 30 days, that's okay. Just strategy and vision to the best of your ability, and then come back and add things. That's the main thing. Don't forget to come back to this plan and add things in as the quarter unfolds. So first things first is when we get into this plan, I'm going to show you in a second, you're going to take, after you've put in all of those objectives, dates, and kind of key brand moments, the third step is that you're going to brainstorm all of your relevant content ideas. So go back to this, all of this ideation elements I gave you, and then let your ideas run wild. Come up with all the content. Don't edit yourself. Just make a list of, what if we did a webinar about this, or I really want to do a blog post about this, and just brainstorm across all the channels that you've defined as relevant. And again, think about here, how could this content be repurposed? How could I, turn a podcast into a video on a blog, or how could a blog become a social post? Think about how could you repurpose as you start to ideate. And then also, again, consider this notion of, could I partner with somebody? So yeah, I'm writing a blog post on this topic, but would it be that much bigger if I built it with this other person, this other brand? The fourth step is going to be to map it to your content calendars. So you're going to take all your brainstorming and map it out by channel, and making sure that you're keeping that notion of a cadence that is doable for you in mind. And then you're going to add in all of your key brand events, holidays, launch dates, etc. And then the last step is that you are going to edit all of this. So you're going to adjust, you're going to assess, what is really doable. If you have to pare it back, maybe there's a parking lot place, you set those ideas aside, and then you come back to when you have more capacity, or you've hired somebody who can handle it, et cetera, et cetera. And this is also about deciding whose job it is to do these things. So if you are not going to be the person who's going to write all the content, make sure that you figure out somebody else who's going to help you with that. And if you are, make sure you carve out the time on the calendar to delegate it to yourself. And the last step is, if you have others involved in this beautiful plan I'm about to show you, make sure that you take the time needed to walk other people through the plan so that they understand the next steps, and that everybody is really certain and clear as to how to take this strategy and now turn it into action. So I feel like I've teased this idea enough. I'm going to switch my screen sharing. Please let me know when you see something new on my screen. And I need to shout out to my beautiful, amazing Fearless Foundry team for the development of this new edition of our production calendar. So we have recently migrated to Notion, and almost everything we do these days is in Notion, and we're obsessed with it. But spoiler, if you're not in Notion yet, or the thought of another tool or system scares you, don't worry, I have a version of this in Google Sheets as well. It's just not as pretty. So this is where we're going to take all of those actions. So I mentioned that idea of first mapping out themes, brand events, key holidays. This is where you do that inside of your marketing plan. And so you will add these little items and icons that allow you to build in those things so you can think about it at the highest level. Next, once you've got all of those mapped out, and you're going to start brainstorming your content. And so here I could say, oh, Cecily gave me a great idea today. We're going to do let's do a blog on, on scaling your accounting practice. And I'm going to just dump that there for now. And then I'm going to worry about mapping it out later. But once I've got all my ideas in order and I'm ready to map them out, I can give them a month, a date, an assignment to somebody on my team. I can define the type of content it is. I can fill it out with all the notes needed. And what you'll see is, as I start to define those things, so we'll say, let's say that we're going to do this one on December 2nd, even though the dates happen, you'll see that it pops automatically into my production calendar down here, which is a calendar view that then you can drag and drop and edit. And you can say, actually, it's not realistic for me to get that done, so I'm going to change that to the 30th. And you'll see that my task up here reflects that change accordingly. And so suddenly, if you're a visual learner, you can start to really play with this notion of a calendar and say, oh, if I have a webinar here, yeah, it does make sense for the first email to go out here, and the next email to go out here, and the follow-up email to go here. But oh, wait, our newsletter goes out on the day. So you can make those visual adjustments. Now, the cool thing about this is my team has gone a step further by breaking this down by marketing channels. So each time you assign an activity to a certain content type, it's going to go into that channel. And if you go into that channel, you can just brainstorm channel by channel. So if you want to just focus on brainstorming for your blog, here's where you do it. And we've even given you these really in-depth best practices guides. So we write guides on how you should do email marketing, how you should do social media, but we've taken kind of some of our best of nuggets and put them here in each channel so that, you know, when you start to work on, oh, I really do want to do a podcast, we've got some ideas as to, best practices on podcast marketing that you can kind of use as inspiration as you start to brainstorm in that area. So there's a lot under the hoods here, but you're also going to want to make sure we mention that notion of having your goals in place. That's the start of the process. Start here by adding your goals. Then you can get into the themes, adding your content archetypes. And we even included all of these questions here that came up earlier in this session when it comes to assessing your marketing performance. So you could start by putting forward your goals for the next 3 months. And there you can come and reflect back and track how you're doing on those sort of things. Additionally, you can put in your content pillars. So if you notice there's certain themes or topics that are performing really well, we consider these content pillars. So you can add them here. We've also included some great resources. So we've got the slide deck from this session if you forget what we talked about. You've got a marketing toolkit that's really helpful, some best practices guides in marketing, a production calendar template that is in Google Sheets instead of in Notion if you want to play with that version, as well as some other downloadable resources that might help you. Now, as I mentioned, if this all looks overwhelming, if you're new to Notion and you don't want to sign up for it, I've also built this all in Google Sheets. So the same concept applies. You set up your goals here, you add your themes, you add in all your key dates by channel. I've broken it down weekly. Feel free to remove the weekliness if you don't want to think that granular. There's a tab for, again, brainstorming, putting all your ideas out into motion, and then the ability to start mapping that at the calendar level and building a specific calendar just for social media. So that is the tools that allow you to take this 5-step strategy and to put it into action. And from here, we just have to get you, on your way. So the last steps of this session are to, one, do not forget that strategy is an ongoing process. This is something that we do at the quarterly level for our clients in a detailed way. And then we do big vision work for 6 months at a time. And so really what that allows us, and we learned this a lot during COVID, is that if you're too married to things that are at the month or at the year-long level or the 6-month-long level, things can change. And think about all the people who built 2020 marketing plans that went completely sideways. And so sometimes it's better to strategize at that quarterly level and let it evolve. And again, these templates, we're giving them to you all as templates so that you can make a copy and make it your own. And so, refine it as you need to really have it be something that makes sense for you and your brand. But this is a tool that you can work with to get you started. So I know we're over time. I'm really appreciative and honored that everybody stayed this long. Is there any burning questions or thoughts that anybody wants to share or make sure that they get answered before we wrap up the session today? I'm going to hold space for that and just know that I'm open to it. And if you come up with one after the fact, you can hit me and my team up. We're happy to answer questions. But I haven't seen anything come through the chat just yet, besides what is my lighting and camera setup. I have a ring light over here. I have another light that is just for like seasonal depression that's over here. That's great. And then my mic is a Shure mic, and that's the one that's recommended by our podcast producer. But any other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Closing couple things, I just want to let y'all know, you're going to get an email after the fact that's going to have this recording. It's going to have these templates, so the links to the Notion version and the Google Sheets version, and it's going to also have the slides as a PDF. My ask is that if you extend those on to somebody else, you make sure that they, know who Fearless Foundry is. I'm big on resource sharing, but I also just want to get credit for the work we put into this, because this session takes a lot of work from myself and mostly from my team. They're amazing at putting these things together. And then lastly, some questions had come up about this, but at the end of your slides, you'll see there's this section where you can click through and check out all these different ways to work with Fearless Foundry. So one is to, work with us directly at our team and have us do, the work for you in some ways or partially for you. You can schedule a consult with us. We do these free consults for folks that are interested in working with us. We have something called the library, which is a training archive of all of the content we've created over the past 5 years. It's got over 100 different resources on marketing, branding, strategy, all sorts of amazing sessions in there. And you can either become a member of the library and buy a lifelong membership, or you can buy sessions, and some of them are free, some of them are $5. And then I've also got huge courses in there. I've got a course on marketing strategy that you can buy in there. And then my last thing is I'll just mention we're going to be doing more sessions like this. I think we're going to drop at least one a quarter next year. The first one will be about social media strategy. And so if you want to go deeper in any of these topics and just do more training with us, keep an eye out for that. Oh, and last but not least, there's all these resources in here too. So I made mention of things. This is like me citing my sources. So if, the inclusive marketing blog is in here, there's a great course on marketing. Again, the library content. If you're not on our newsletter already, join that. It is called The Thursday Thought. We've got tons of white papers and ebooks to help you get educated on things like email marketing, social media strategy, etc. Check those out. And yeah, that is all I've got. Does anybody have any outstanding questions? I know it was a little bit over time. If I had done 12:30, I would have nailed it. But does anybody have any other thoughts or feedback before we wrap up? All right. Well, I'll hang out here for a couple more minutes, but thank you to everyone who took the time to just be a part of this session today. And again, if you know somebody who could benefit from this content, please help us spread the word and pass it on. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Happy holidays. Happy New Year, everyone, as well. And we'll be talking to y'all soon. Take care, everybody.
Wait, I do have a question.
Yeah, Cecily, go for it.
Now, I'm not really doing marketing yet, or, that's probably down the road, but this is helpful. But I do have a client who, and I'm just wondering, is SEO, is that separate from marketing normally?
No, I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't touch on it a ton in this session, but we have a lot of guides and resources in our ebooks that are just about SEO. So SEO is search engine optimization, and ultimately SEO and SEM, search engine marketing, is this combination of activities you can do to better boost yourself in search results. And so some of that is very website centric. So for example, there's ways that you can build up keywords inside of your website so that you can better perform from a search perspective, or that you can be architecting the metadata. Those are things like the titles and subtitles inside your site to, again, better perform in search. And then there's also a huge side to search engine optimization or search engine marketing, which is really about the content that you're producing and publishing that's picked up by those platforms like Google. And so, for example, blogging is a lot of times a big part of people's SEO strategy, because those engines, Google's an engine, is always looking for new and relevant content. And so we do a lot of SEO specific blog writing for our clients to help them identify what are the topics and keywords that the engine is looking for, and where could, and doesn't have a lot of things to pull from. How could you create a piece of content that's really going to rank and get people to drive traffic back to your site? But ultimately, the goal of search engine marketing or search engine optimization is to better tailor your website and the content your website is producing to drive traffic back to your site.
Okay. Yeah, because I have a client who has she has somebody doing marketing, and then they had like a separate contract for SEO, and I was like, should that be together? Or
and it is this thing where some people, there's like the level of like, I know enough to be dangerous, and then I'm like, I'm an SEO expert. And there's just in the same way with like digital ads, there's agencies that's all they specialize in. And so for some people, depending on the nature of their business, it can really make sense to have an SEO expert. Sometimes I think that there's people in those spaces that are also selling snake oil. But
Yeah.
I will say that there's this big challenge in our marketing arena now, which is like, you can't be just creative. You also have to be really analytical when it comes to the data. And so SEO is a very analytical practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may send her your way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love
Like,
to chat with her.
She's totally, her business is totally aligned with your.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Thank you for thinking of us, Cecily. And good to see you as well. It's been a little while.
I miss you.
I miss you too. And thank you everyone who stayed on to the very, very end. And great questions, Cecily, to close us out with. So take care, everybody. I'm gonna wrap up this webinar. I'll see you soon.